It's about history. It's about preservation. It's about sense of place here on Eastern Long Island. With Esperanza Leon, I'm Irwin Levy, and this is Our Hamptons. Esperanza, good morning.
Hello, Irwin.
You know, Esperanza, this particular episode, I have to admit I love saying this because, again, it really speaks to the longevity of the staying power of Our Hamptons podcast. This particular episode is going to touch on a lot of, dare I say, recurring characters in Our Hamptons podcast, Esperanza, right?
For sure. And just so many. It's what is so amazing to me is how it's not just a local subject, right? Like most of these things that we do talk about often have greater national, even international at times, connections. And this one in particular, for
incredibly
sure.
True. And again, Esperanza, it goes back to something you and I always say. What is it about this place that has the special sauce that its prominence, both in things that are sort of sketchier, like what we may be talking about today, and of course, the real history. And hey, Esperanza, I just gave myself the segue. So I think what we're going to do is get right into it because what we're talking about is prohibition. Now, prohibition, was really all over Long Island. And I think for our Hamptons podcast audience, and for myself for that matter, I'm going to give the definition of prohibition, which was the Volstead Act of 1920. And prohibition was enforced for 13 years, 1920 to 1933.
That's a lucky number.
It is a lucky number. That's a good point. And I guess we could call it, as a definition, it was the nationwide constitutional ban on the production, the importation, the transportation, and the sale of alcohol.
Yeah, I mean, specifically anything with more than 0.5% alcohol.
It's really,
and let's keep in mind, the medicinal uses, if you will, at the time when anesthesia was
that's right.
Not really something.
That's right. I mean, thank God for modern medicine. I need anesthesia if someone takes a splinter out, but no, exactly true. And I mean, right, in the 1800s, they literally gave someone a bottle of whiskey if they were doing a surgery, right?
Totally, exactly.
But this is really, it takes in so many elements that I think what we're going to do is we're going to touch on the lighter elements. Maybe a little bit later on in this episode, we'll delve a little bit deeper into the weeds with the history, but a lot of wide-ranging sources here from the New York Times, an article of 100 years ago we'll get to in a minute, but from a website I found, Esperanza, called, and I don't even know if this site is still out there. The name itself is pretty cool, theusualmontauk.com. And love that name. Now, this is an article really from 10 years ago, 2015, and how it talks about Montauk, of course, a term we've said, our favorite drinking village with a fishing problem that has had a long love affair with the bottle, and how basically Long Island, Montauk in particular, the involvement with prohibition took on a lot of names that I think
my favorite. Hold on. My favorite. It wasn't Long Island. It was Liquor Island.
It was Liquor. That also was another quote. Thank you for that. Yeah, that was actually, yeah. There was a minister. We should really start with that because I think that does set a really good tone. A minister from a book written by Amy Kaluga Folk called Rum Running in Suffolk County. Great segue, Esperanza. Liquor was flowing like a river from the Shinnecock to the New York City. Long Island was Liquor Island. It was the wettest spot in the country.
Yeah.
Now, we had cast of characters that are going to be so familiar to all of us and our listeners of Our Hamptons podcast. Esperanza, we had Carl Fisher. I mean, okay, it's Mr. Montauk, we could call him. I mean, his fingerprints are all over this place.
Yeah, and why is it hardly surprising to me that this would have some association with him and specifically just with moneyed interests and money, power, sometimes criminal activity go together.
1,000%. Now, Carl Fisher's Island Club on Star Island, that's the current Montauk Yacht Club, I guess, Esperanza, but this was really the most glamorous speakeasy, certainly on Long Island. I mean, maybe even a broader range than that. It had a lot of high profile visitors engaging in these illicit activities. And we're going to get involved soon on how Carl Fisher got the liquor that he was serving. But it was Errol Flynn, it was John Barrymore, Ernest Hemingway, and then New York City Mayor Jimmy Walker. All of these people were partaking in this. And
Regulars, I'm sure.
right, the regular, right. This was, you know, hey, Esperanza, Carl Fisher's Island Club was Cheers, right? I mean,
Where everybody knows your name.
right, yeah, apparently. And, to the point you just made about all of these prominent people involved in this, from that New York Times story, which was a incredible story from 1925. So it's a 100-year-old New York Times article.
Right, in the midst of this period.
Exactly. And Esperanza, on Carl Benson's, remember, we're talking 100 years ago, on his
Arthur Benson.
Arthur Benson, excuse me, not Carl. Yeah, I don't want to mix up those names. Arthur Benson, on his 4,000 acre estate, which is what he had at the time in 1925, $250,000 worth of liquor. I don't know what that would translate into present day dollars, but
A
see,
million? I don't know. I
no,
mean,
I mean,
it's baffling. Yeah, yeah.
$250,000 in 1925 was real money.
Well,
And
curiously, like that was what was found, and it was on his estate, but somehow, Arthur Benson didn't go to jail. I mean,
that's
right.
that's a
Or
very
prison or anything.
that's and yeah, that is definitely.
Not much in the way of enforcement of this Prohibition Act.
By the way, the more things change, the more they stay the same because it seems
Totally.
like a lot of these people, somehow, some way,
Slippery, slippery.
very slippery like eels, very, very slippery, but,
But speaking
Esperanza,
of eels, like
yeah,
let's not dwell on the fact that the people that profited from this were sort of a lot of the moneyed classes. I mean, this was a boon for a lot of locals. And, these articles, this research that you found obviously speaks to that, where, here we are surrounded by water. And so easy access to the rum row, as they called it.
that's right.
And so the local baymen, fishermen, those were the people that profited from this.
1,000%. And, in this little article, that's exactly what they were saying. They were literally, I like the way they termed it, the fishermen, the baymen, they were the pioneers
Mm,
of this black market business. And to keep this thing going, and this is one of my favorite parts of the story, Esperanza. We were touching on this before we went on. It wasn't only dodging law enforcement, predominantly the Coast Guard. That wasn't even, you brought this up when we were talking, that wasn't even their biggest threat. Their bigger threat were pirates. I mean, were there pirates in the early 20s? I guess so. But,
sure.
you know,
There are always pirates. There are
I,
still pirates.
I me bucko. Yeah. And mobsters, like the 19-year-old good friend, by the way, of Carl Fisher, Al
Yeah,
Capone,
that's a fact that I
right?
was surprised to hear, but then again, not. I mean, think about it. That's how Miami became Miami. I mean, you have people like Capone involved in those affairs.
That's right. And again, it's a great point to bring up because
Atlantic City.
right. But you bring up Miami and Carl Fisher's start was in Miami, right? I mean,
Correct.
he
Yeah.
came, so he probably knew Al Capone from Miami. We're speculating, but that's Al Capone became Al Capone by bootlegging. That was
Right.
his entree
Yeah.
into the underworld.
And I'm sure he invested in some of Fisher's enterprises. It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we go on. I mean, looking into this New York Times article from April of 1925. I mean, that's hard to believe. And this was like the headline of the paper. I mean, I actually saw the newspaper before what the headline looked. Montauk rum war leads to inquiry. Reports of huge bribes paid by bootleggers to be investigated by Suffolk County. Esperanza and I highlighted this, right? District Attorney George W. Hildreth,
Right. A local name. Yeah.
local name. And I mean, we're not going to delve too deep in here, but there apparently was a rookie member of the state troopers that was part and parcel of all of this, with bribes. And that's where the investigation took place and where the authorities seized the $250,000 worth of liquor at the Benson state. Sums as high as, and again, this is 100 years ago, sums as high as $400 a week were being paid by bootleggers as bribes. That's There was a
Right. And
lot.
this was a state trooper who was, I guess, trying to get a piece of the action, right?
That's
If I understood correctly. So it's
that's
like everybody got corrupted by this amendment to the law.
no completely true. I mean, I guess, and Esperanza, it's a great point to bring up. Like, yeah, a lot of it had to be the money. I mean, Rick,
Sure.
this was
That was it.
that
I
was it.
mean,
It was the opportunity to make money, but there was also the motivation. Hey, man, I miss happy hour. Like that had to be part of it also. I mean,
yeah.
like, we're going to get into this because it gets into the whole mindset of how there was a whole movement, to make this country dry. But we're going to get down that. We're going to go down that road shortly. But you just move along here, and there was a book written in. This was about 3 years ago in April of 22, and really was documented all of this from the History Press rum running in Suffolk County. And again, to your point, the reviewer here, John Eilerstein, started this conversation off by saying, in the early '80s, when he was documenting East Hampton's fishing community, one Springs bayman, this is to your point exactly, shyly admitted that he was able to purchase his first car with his pay, and how many Amagansett baymen wore long overcoats with multiple inside pockets where liquor was being stashed and separated.
Right. It kind of it's an adaptation of the term bootleg,
That's
right? As would be the coat pocket.
Let me have word origins for 300, Alex. But
Right,
yes,
exactly. Yeah. Well,
that's
I mean, the
that.
word origin of bootlegging is not exactly stellar, but yes, it's
But that's really
that is
true.
where it comes from, is
Eh,
stashing the liquor in your boot.
exactly.
When and this was back farther when there was trading with Native Americans, right? I
That's
mean,
right.
it's
I mean, like, it's just, like so many of these stories, Esperanza, like, the more you start digging, the crazier it gets.
so many things that, expressions that we are still in use today. I mean, it depends, maybe the generation, it's a generational thing, but something like, well, bootlegging came through and was really used during this time period, for as applied in how you described the law, whether it was producing, selling,
That's right. That's right.
um, it
That's
was
right.
bootlegging, right?
And,
But then
and
think about with the speakeasies, the expression, and you know this, Irwin, 86.
oh my gosh. moving on. But yes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad you didn't 86 this topic because
No,
it's great.
no, but like, you
Well,
know,
and also, wait a minute, and also the real McCoy. I mean, another term. Like we
that's
all
right.
use these terms and maybe don't realize where they came from.
I'm like often amazed at that, like, how things find their way into the American vernacular like that,
Right,
right? It's
right.
just, extraordinary. Give me your John Hancock instead of just sign your name. I mean, like all
Yeah,
of
so
these things just
the real McCoy was this Captain William McCoy
that.
who supposedly established the rum row right
Oh
off
yeah,
the coast, right? And his schooner was open for business 24 hours a day. And but he was known not to be, to be fair and to sell quality goods, nothing watered down or
right.
diluted. And that's why his product became known as the real McCoy.
That's right. That it's,
I love that. I love that story.
I mean, that is like, and it's funny, like you don't realize how these things come to play until you really delve a little bit deeper. And that really is such a cool story. You know, that's the real, yeah, that guy, he had a great reputation within that right? I
Right.
mean,
Right.
you want the good stuff, you get the real
To,
McCoy.
to
It's
Captain McCoy, you
phenomenal.
get the real McCoy. Yeah.
Phenomenal. What a super cool. But extending on this, and the Montauk Library even put a couple of things together that I found in off of their website, extending on the bootlegging and what the storyline we just said with the long coats with the pockets. The liquor was stashed in the cellars or even the bedrooms of houses in the old. I'm saying now I'm doing this for effect. Fishing village that was Montauk, right? And
Oh, yeah.
th-
And let's not just limit it to Montauk. This was
correct. And
everywhere.
this
I
was
mean,
also
people
uh,
in Wainscott might say they never did that, but
right, exactly. And yes, our podcast is Our Hamptons. This was going on Up Island as well. I mean, this was not
oh,
just
for sure. But
uh,
you don't think about, like where I grew up in the village of East Hampton,
that's right.
across the street, this house nowadays looks like, like an estate house.
It,
But back in the day, it was the Yardley family, and I know the Yardley, Mrs. Yardley. She was a bootlegger.
right. Yeah. I mean,
I think they stored some liquor in those cellars at that house.
no question about it. And like, in this Montauk Library thing, they did an oral history interview with a Bob Burns, and I love this the way he puts it, whose father and his uncle were both in quotation marks, the liquor business,
The liquor
because the liquor
business.
business. And he goes on to say here, the shore at the west side of Fort Pond Bay, near Rocky Point and what's called Rod's Valley, uh, was a favorite spot because Esperanza, it's remote now.
I
Could you
know
imagine it?
exactly. I was just gonna say. I mean, imagine then. Yeah,
It
yeah.
was remote now. And this goes on, and we spoke about this, the ingenuity involved in rum running, how clever these people were, how Esperanza, they were, that was a dramatic pause. We do that on our Hamptons podcast. They're concealing the liquor beneath hulls of codfish, loads of bread, truckloads of potatoes, Bridgehampton Loam, underneath in oil tankers.
Well, you would think they would have been making vodka. Come on,
Right, right,
with those
right. Yeah, that
potatoes.
came later. But, this would be moved around as this article goes on. It would be moved around out east while prohibition agents were testifying in court in Brooklyn. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
telling
they
you,
were taking advantage of those agents being a little preoccupied.
that's right. I mean, the rum runners devised a secret code in a notebook. Listen to this, tossed from a speedboat fleeing the Coast Guard, and a North Fork fisherman would then pull it up in a net.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, when you think about the things that were sort of, like you feel uh, handicapped somehow without your phone
Right.
nowadays, and how, Google is my friend or
That's
whatever,
right.
or Chat GPT and look at all they accomplished with none of this
Nothing.
technology.
I
I
mean,
mean,
this
incredible.
this is like homing pigeons, right? Like putting,
Yes.
I mean, they're throwing a notebook in the water and a fisherman is picking it up. It's unbelievable the ingenuity going on here.
The
You know,
organization, right? Yeah, yeah. It
well,
wouldn't surprise me if might come across somewhere in a dune one day if there were, if there was digging allowed, to find a whole stash of hooch.
I, I would
Because that did happen. They would dig it into the dune, right?
1000%, and it's just, I mean, this stuff is just the coolest story. But, to delve a little deeper, there was an article. I mean, I sent this article to Esperanza. I mean, I sort of condensed it here, but I don't know how many pages this article was. It was practically like a book, but it was an article written by someone who at the time was from Stony Brook University, a Jonathan Ali. I told Esperanza I was tempted to reach out to this guy to interview him for this podcast, but he wrote an article, Long Island During Prohibition. And, he gets into a lot of it and, how from New York City to the West, in the West to the coastal villages on the North and South Fork, Prohibition affected nearly everyone living on Long Island.
Oh, no doubt. No.
And, during these dry years, Long Island and its adjacent waters were integral to supplying New York City's nightclubs and speakeasies, not just out here, but also New York, because it was going on in the
Yeah,
city as well.
and it's, you think about bars, all the time, but if you've ever been to, and this goes for, I'm sure, many of these Gold Coast estate, these mansions
That's right.
dotting the coast here on Long Island, if you go to Coe Hall in Plantingfield, right? Have you been?
Yes, I have.
So
Sure.
have you seen the secret bar?
That's right.
It's like my favorite part of that whole house.
Yeah, I mean, and again, we speak about ingenuity, and I don't want to go off on a tangent, but like, you go back a little further in history, the Underground Railroad. I mean, like how the
People
ingenuity,
always get around
he
the law.
perfectly said, for in every
Rules were made to be
generation,
broken. Is that the
in every generation, people somehow, some way, or technology, no technology, they seem to always circumvent the
Oh,
process.
sure. Flout the law. No
Flout the
question.
law,
Yeah.
flout the law. But again, we should really, while I don't want to get too deep in the weeds here, Esperanza, we do have to really say, and Esperanza is going to bring something really local in here, which is super cool, which she just taught me. But this anti-alcohol was not new. I mean, this was going on 100 years before Prohibition. This article that Jonathan Ali wrote, how in a meeting in Aquabog, Long Island, on the North Fork, they unanimously adopted a resolution that hereafter ardent spirits and wine shall constitute no part of our entertainment at any or all public meetings. 1829, Esperanza, 14 men organized, and this is, I'm going to give you your segue now, organized the Sag Harbor Temperance Society.
Right. But this meeting in Aquabog, Irwin, that was 1811. I mean,
Amazing.
this country was very young.
35 years, according
Yes.
to my
But
math.
yeah, so I mean, this was a movement, a constant movement. And let's remember, this was a time still in those early days of human history on this little on this continent. Um, Interestingly, people didn't necessarily want to drink the water because they would get sick, right? Like
Right.
when you think about the choleras and
That's
the
right.
plagues and everything in Europe, I mean, they were coming off of that. So water isn't safe to drink. We're
That
going to drink liquor.
that's an important distinction. It also served as their argument in saying, "Hey, why is there prohibition? We want something safe to drink." I mean, it took in a lot of territory there, right?
Right. But obviously, especially when there's religion involved, there was an aspect of, well, alcohol corrupts, right?
Yes.
And so, yeah, 1811, 1829 in Sag Harbor. I mean, that's the Temperance Society there. I know, I mean, maybe not a lot of people know this. I didn't know this, but Abraham Lincoln was also involved in the temperance movement. Um, and what you were referring to, that I mentioned what to you earlier is in Wainscott, we have our lovely Wainscott Chapel stewarded by the Wainscott Sewing Society, and the original group of women that organized as sort of a ladies' society. It was really based on the temperance movement. And to this day, the chapel is dry.
Wow. I mean,
It's in the bylaws.
that's the whole storyline takes in there's so many avenues it takes in. It's really extraordinary. And just to wrap up in Sag Harbor, we there's a portion here, the Young Men's Total Abstinence Temperance Society. They reported that 1841, 650 citizens out of a total population of the time of 3,000 pledged total abstinence. So this was a real movement going on here, and
Yeah, and when you think about the sort of worldly or cosmopolitan gathering place that was Sag Harbor at the time with the whaling
right,
industry, with people coming from all over, from this, especially islands where rum was flowing.
that's right.
There was, the French, the English, the all kinds of cultures coming together. And I'm sure that this little village felt overwhelmed by those vices.
I mean, I have to believe so, and just pushing on with this story. And I mean, this article is, I don't we could spend hours just talking about this one article, going over everything, but Jonathan Alley puts in here how during a portion living with prohibition, Esperanza, we just spoke about circumventing the law, right? People
Mm.
doing this. Commercial wineries were able to stay in business by producing sacramental and kosher wines for churches and synagogues.
I'm sure exclusively for that purpose.
I'm, you know,
You
it, it's
can't imagine they were doing anything on the side.
in June of 23, officers confiscated whiskey and 10 gallons of wine from the Deer Park home of Hyman Adler, an Austrian immigrant and storekeeper. He was charged with unlawfully possessing these liquors. He went to court with both a lawyer and his rabbi. And apparently, Mr. Adler convinced the jury that it was to be used for sacramental purposes, and the jury acquitted him. And the judge ordered his wine returned. I mean, a Walter Piers, a licensed pharmacist in Brooklyn, would issue a patient a bottle of whiskey because this was also medicinal alcohol,
Medicinal.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
As we were speaking before, Esperanza, right? In the 1800s, anesthesia was you gave a guy a bottle of whiskey and just did what you
Exact.
had to.
Yeah, pain killing. Like
Right.
whiskey was a painkiller. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Esperanza, to that point you made in terms of people circumventing the law, it's like medical marijuana today. I mean, they were able to, and enforcing prohibition, like a group like the Ku Klux Klan, they were
Even they
able,
were involved.
they were involved,
Well, yeah,
and
no, and for sure there was a lot of prejudice that surrounded the temperance movement. And yes, like the Ku Klux Klan is an essential part of it, but even, I mean, this coincides with World War I, around World War I, with this article that mentions the sort of the profiling, that took place. Um, if you were German and you drank beer, uh, that was un-American, and
right,
if you were, as a German immigrant, you were looked down upon because of that, because
such
that
an important
corrupted people.
such an important point, and I'm so glad you brought that up. A great philosopher once said history is circular, and history being circular. That's an Esperanza Leon quote. I will say this on every Our Hamptons podcast till this thing's. She doesn't like to take claim for that, but I'm giving her credit. But that was profiling. that was ethnic profiling at the
Yeah,
time, right? I
yeah,
mean,
certainly.
and the Klan, the Ku Klux Klan, they used prohibition as a vehicle to sort of legitimatize themselves, right? I mean, this was their way of saying, hey, we're patriotic Americans. We don't want prohibition. And
Yeah, anything that, you weren't white, you weren't Protestant, you were a target for the KKK.
yeah, I mean, the KKK, listen to that. They were participating in raids. They were burning crosses to threaten enemies. They were tipping off the authorities about speakeasy. They were legitimate. Really, I'm reading into it like that. I mean, to me, they were trying to legitimatize themselves. And Esperanza, we really have to touch on this, one brief episode here. The author calls it the most perhaps infamous event to take place on Long Island, where three members of the Klan forced five young men into a car at gunpoint in Southampton in 19
Imagine Southampton.
right in 1931, drove them to an isolated North Sea cottage, excuse me. Three of the men escaped, but Thomas Farrell Jr. and Jacob Antoletti were left behind.
I
And
know, I know this family, by the way, the Antolettis. I
no
have to
kidding.
now, yeah, I have to ask them about this.
I mean, and they were accused of knowing about a hijacked liquor shipment. They denied it. They were burned with a red hot potato masher, badly beaten. The Klansmen were arrested and charged with kidnapping and assault. But I mean, this was what was going on here, Esperanza. I mean, just
Good times, good times.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I guess, and we should really
I know.
we should start to get this. We're going to start wrapping this up. I mean, really, because again, Esperanza, this is, as we would describe on our Hamptons podcast, a very meaty topic that you could spend, gosh, I don't know how long on, but post prohibition, it really, to sort of put an exclamation point and a finish line on this story. When FDR won a landslide election in November of 32, the Democrats at the time were all in favor of ending prohibition. And FDR's election also, all branches of government, the executive along with the legislative, that election gave them control of both houses for the first time since 1914. So it was 18 years since the Democrats had full control. And that's basically was the end of prohibition with FDR's. And it coincided when he was inaugurated and in 33. And that's when prohibition ended, right? What a wild story. But, the author should really wrap up with this. At the other end of Long Island in Greenport, uh, and I never knew this. Apparently, Claudio's, that's been there since apparently 1870, the Claudio family. I know I don't think it's the Claudio's on it now, but at
No,
this,
yeah, unfortunately they just sold it.
yeah, but at the start of, this family opened a French restaurant, but they kept the bar secretly stocked with smuggled liquor. And I love this. Within a week of beer's legalization in 1933, Claudio's advertised that they were now serving Old Heidelberg alongside their seafood and sandwiches. And within a year, opened a liquor store on the premises. I
They
just,
had, yeah, they definitely had uh they were stakeholders in the liquor industry.
exactly, exactly. Dare I use the term, they had inside information. So they were able to really go right into that industry, probably very lucratively. They were so intricately involved that when it became legal again, boy, they probably really cashed in because they had everything, they had everything ready in place, ready to go. But
Yeah, I
boy,
mean, Claudio's might be a good episode,
I,
Irwin.
I could there, it's that's
We
really
should
does have
travel to Greenport.
that does have potential. Esperanza, this was really it's a
Great
lot,
subject.
really
Great, great
terrific
subject. So
subject.
much. I mean, my one of my favorite things before we go was thinking about how, you know, we always talk about the industries here, cottage industries, if you will, but still, no, actually very lucrative for the people on the East End, or at least not very lucrative, but survival, with farming and fishing, and always, sort of being able to prosper on the East End. But at this time, the fishmongers, the fish dealers were complaining
That's
that
right.
there was a little bit of scarcity to the fish flow from Long Island.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. That's a really good place to close with.
Uh,
The from the files of the fishermen were aware of, obviously, of what was going on with bootlegging, and the honest fishermen making a living off of the sea, they were claiming they were being hurt by this to an extent. I guess it
well,
was.
no, I don't know. I wouldn't say they were being hurt by this. This was like this was a side gig
Oh,
that
no,
made
but
made some money.
yeah, no, for the ones that were involved. But what I mean is, I think the ones that were doing the straight and narrow and not partaking in it,
I have a feeling most were not
you know.
straight and narrow. Just
Yeah,
saying.
I'm going to talk out of the side of my mouth also. Yeah, you're probably right. But one last thing we should leave with, Esperanza, before we wrap up. Our friends at the Montauk Historical Society are actually going to have. We never know when we air this episode, but it should be over the summer. There will be an entire exhibit at the Carl Fisher House in Montauk, from the Montauk Historical Society. Shout out to Mia Sertic. We like her very much. And they're going to have a whole exhibit on this subject, which should be a lot of fun. So maybe this episode will coincide when
Oh,
that is
that
being
would be
released.
great.
That'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And Esperanza, thank you for going down this road with me. And like you always do. And as always, a pleasure.
Thank you, Irwin.
Bye bye.
Until next time.
Thanks so much for joining us. New episodes of Our Hamptons are released every other Tuesday. Find them wherever you get your podcasts.